All right, there we go. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. I know Mondays can be a little hectic, but this is a really important topic that we wanted to get out and let everybody know what's kind of happening right now. So I'm Steve Hartman, the product marketing manager for GatherUp. I'm joined in the chat. Chris Walker, as most of you know, will be manning the chat and helping us out. And then the guest of honor today, Mr. Mike Blumenthal. He will be going through some of the FTC changes, guidelines, best practices that have come out recently. He's been doing a lot of research and talking about this on Near Media and his Near Media blog. And so we'll talk about that. And then we will also, hit on, of course, how it impacts your business and what you should be doing. And then finally, I will go through a few of the GatherUp product updates, things you should know about in product. A lot of it is for new customers, but there are some things you can be doing to make sure you're following the FTC guidance that has just come out recently. So with that, I think we're all set. Mike, I'll let you take it away.
Great. As you know, I tend to delve into these things oftentimes too deeply. This is only about a 17-minute presentation, so it's not that deep, but feel free to message your questions. Chris will interrupt me and we can get them answered in real time. We welcome them. It's an exciting time in reviews. It's been exciting, but this sort of added a little bit to the excitement. I'm going to first be going over the new guidance for businesses and marketers. Then I'll cover the guidance that the FTC provided for agencies, and then close with some ideas on living with the new standards. Reviews are very interesting to me and always have been because they are taking on an increasing role in our economic life. You can't rent a house on vacation. You can't buy a car. You can't get a new dishwasher or refrigerator without looking at reviews. You can't find a new doctor. So they play a critical role. And over the years, since we first introduced GatherUp, where gating was our main selling point, the ability to ask just happy customers for reviews, because of the growth of importance of reviews, the standards around them have changed, and they've changed once again. And this is, to my thinking, to the better. You can't go back and say, gee, we should have done something different in the past. We did it the way we did it. But I think it's also important for a number of reasons to stay up with what the current legal and I think social obligations of reviews are. So with that, the FTC came out with some new guidance for businesses, marketers in those businesses. And the obvious one, which Google introduced, I guess in April of 2018, now almost 4 years ago, the idea that you shouldn't be asking just happy customers for review. You should be asking everybody equally and giving them an equal opportunity. The other is that came out of this current go around is when you're displaying reviews on your own site, you shouldn't selectively display just good reviews. You should display all reviews that qualify. And all reviews should be treated equally. You shouldn't, for example, moderate negative reviews and not moderate positive reviews. In other words, letting all your positive reviews go through, but then curate your negative reviews. Or you shouldn't show your reviews for perhaps all the positive ones at top and all the negative ones at the far end, 10 pages deep. They need to be treated equally so that consumers can get a good idea of what your typical service level is like. In addition to those which relate to people getting reviews in the local space, they also covered reviews in the product space and on websites like JCPenney's, where sometimes incentives might make some more sense than they do in local. They don't make any sense in local because they are problematic because of terms of service with Yelp and Facebook and Google and TripAdvisor. But if you're JCPenney running a promotion on your site and you want people to write reviews around bath towels, occasionally incentive might make sense there, but those incentives have to be really obvious. And also, and this has been true forever in reviews, if there's a connection, a material connection between a business and the reviewer, that has to be made obvious as well. If you don't, both those things put you into the area of inappropriate behavior. Now, Google and Yelp and Facebook, again, if somebody says, I'm Mike's aunt, and I think Mike's a great guy, that review is going to get taken down there. So if they do make those material connections, known in local, they're gonna get taken down anyways. So these mostly refer to product reviews. But the FTC really wanted people's attention. So they rolled out this new business marketer guidance simultaneously with agreeing with Fashion Nova that Fashion Nova, which is a direct-to-consumer style company, that they would pay $4.2 million to settle. They provided additional guidance. And simultaneously with that, they sent letters to 10 review platforms in our industry who had indicated that they had violated some of this guidance. Prior to sending those 10 letters out, they had sent out letters to 700 companies directly that they knew gathered reviews, companies like Hertz and 1-800-Florists and Apple and Google, and also gave them heads up about the changing requirements and the standards that they're planning on putting in place. So when Fashion Nova publicly dealt with this issue, their excuse was, my review platform made me do it. Now I went and looked just to see what review platform Fashion Nova was using. I was curious. The FTC though said, yeah, right, you're still responsible. So the idea that a business can blame it on somebody else, you can see by the size of the fine, it's not going to happen. They made it quite clear that if you're a business or you use a service, a review platform, you have to know what that review platform does. You're responsible for it. And you're responsible for the activities of SEO and reputation management firms working on your behalf. So if somebody in the chain is buying fake reviews, or somebody is gating, or somebody is suppressing, even if you don't have clear knowledge of it, you are responsible for it. And they also pointed out that businesses shouldn't overflag to get reviews taken down, and they shouldn't use pay-to-play review sites where they're given preference because they pay a fee. They either get negative reviews taken down or they get higher ratings or so on. But so that takes me to the additional guidance that the FTC released, which was their guidance for platforms. And they didn't specify agencies, but I had a conversation with the FTC, and it became clear in the conversation that agencies that are white labeling and doing the setup of platforms are likely equally responsible. And Steve asked me this question, because businesses have responsibility, does that let agencies and platforms off the hook? And the answer is, yeah, right. There are still obligations that flow through, and they broke down these obligations into 3 big areas. Now, obviously, platforms covers a lot. It covers everything from an agency that's white labeling to a company like GatherUp or GradeUs to a company like Yelp or Google. So the guidance doesn't always directly apply to you, but I think when it doesn't, you want to just try to take away the general thrust of it, not try to thread a needle legalistically. So review collection, similar to the marketer guidelines, you don't want to ask reviews from people that you think will leave you happy customers. In other words, you can't, like we used to do at GatherUp, send out an NPS survey. Those that gave you a high number would go to the review process. Those that gave you a low number didn't. That's explicitly prohibited. If you offer an incentive, you can't condition it on a quality of the review, and you can't prevent or discourage people from leaving negative reviews. In other words, people have to have an equal opportunity to leave you a negative review. Now, a lot of this we dealt with at GatherUp when Google came out with these changes in 2018. And our experience there is that when you make it easy for somebody to give you a review or to complain to you, that most people are going to complain directly. They're not going to go to Google. So it turns out that it isn't such a bad thing as giving them that option to do that, because it gives them a way to vent and to be heard. In terms of moderation, in other words, which reviews get through, this is largely for bigger platforms that don't just get reviews from their own customers, but you want to verify the reviews are genuine, they're not fake or manipulated. Obviously, you can't edit review content to alter the meaning. You need to treat positive and negative reviews equally. Again, this is very similar to what they said to businesses, that you can't publish one and moderate another, or order them in a way that gives preference to viewing one or the other. And you can't subject negative reviews to greater scrutiny. This goes back to holding negative reviews in some sort of queue or moderation queue and publishing them later. And then on to publication, which is making these visible on your website. If the review is genuine and doesn't violate the terms of service, and it needs to be published. You can't hide it just because it's negative. You can't display reviews in a misleading way. This comes back to the idea that you can't delay negative reviews so that they get shifted down the list, or you can't order by ratings as the default, and just show all your happy reviews up front. And for those that are doing products and on their own website, labeling incentives. But it's also now incumbent on people to disclose how you collect, process, and display reviews and calculate ratings. And this probably should be included in terms of service, which we're going to talk about later. Now, this all came about because in late 2020, the FTC did a in-depth investigation of Yatpo. This was the company that was providing the service to Fashion Nova. And in this letter, which did not get a lot of press at the time, the FTC determined not to enforce against Yatpo because they agreed to change their platform. And also, I believe, because they cooperated in terms of making data about their clients available to the FTC. But they noted that Yatpo's star rating and sentiment filter provided the means to easily and deceptively suppress negative reviews against the guidelines, and to mislead customers that reviews displayed reflected the reviews of all purchasers who had submitted them. So these guidelines came out of that. Also, the fine for Fashion Nova came out of that. So this is the new reality. We haven't been gating at GatherUp for a while, but now it's time to, if you're using reviews on your website, to just show them more equitably. Is the big change. Obviously, you have to live with this new standard. The first part of that is understanding any risks you might have in this. The FTC, to a large extent, is a bully pulpit, big job, low budget, understaffed, overworked, and incapable of slapping the hands of every business that doesn't follow these guidelines. So for the most part, the risk is very small. And unlike certain topics like antitrust, where state attorney generals have jumped into the fray, most state attorney generals have not taken on this question of reviews very aggressively, even though they might in the future. And in some states, California and New York, they have. So your risk, if you're not in New York or California, is very, very small. But like everything, it depends. And it depends on whether, one, you received one of these 700 letters they sent out. If you did, you're in their crosshairs. If you use one of the platforms that were mentioned that got the letters directly, the 10 review platforms, GatherUp was not one of them. You are more likely to get audited because, like in the Yatpo Fashion Nova, I believe that the FTC is going to go in, do an audit, and if the company received a letter, they're going to focus on those first, and they're going to look for big customers to make an example of. And obviously, all of these are compounded if you continue to gate or suppress. So the likelihood for any given business to get audited is quite small. But to me, the real risk is around your consumer relationship. We're in a time when customers believe that they have a right, and they through reviews, to co-tell your brand story, to tell your brand story, and they expect honesty as a result of that. And they're also getting smarter dealing with fake reviews. I had a friend who had a roof replaced on his house, he did due diligence. He went to Google, looked up the reviews, and hired a company, local company, to do it. And they did a terrible job. And he had to go to his insurance company. The insurance company insisted they hire a lawyer to sort of recoup some of the cost. And when he discovered that this company was gating, he then not only fed that information to the insurance company lawyers, but he reported it to the state attorney generals. So I think that the bigger risk in this is that your customers will find it incredibly disingenuous and dishonest that you've been doing it. And ultimately, that is where the rubber meets the road in the real world. I think, though, that these standards are not unreasonable, and I think that you need to embrace them. When we switched to gating in 2018, we did a very interesting real world experiment with it. We looked at 10,000 insurance agents that were on GatherUp. And the year before gating and the year after gating was a very large sample. You can see tens of thousands of reviews. And the ratings didn't change that much. Went from 4.66 to 4.59, a small, slight decrease, but not a lot. But more importantly, the volume of reviews, particularly at Google, went up by 68%. So the reality is that gating only marginally reduces your star rating, but because it makes it so much easier for people to leave reviews, it seems to dramatically improve the number of reviews you get. And like I pointed out earlier, if you're giving people the opportunity to complain in this process, most people have no desire to rip you a new one. They just want to be heard and have their problems fixed, and would just as soon do it privately as publicly. We see that almost all the time at GatherUp. So gating is one of these things that most people that use GatherUp don't do, can't do, it's hard to do, and have accepted that as a reality. Review suppression, we have allowed people to select which reviews to publish on their website, but like gating, it doesn't really work. Firstly, negative reviews are really important to customers. I, as an example, trying to keep my svelte body in shape, went to try to buy an exercise bicycle, went to Consumer Reports to first get an expert opinion, looked at the top 3, then went to Amazon, where I didn't even look at the star ratings. I went directly to the negative reviews to understand if any of them had issues that I couldn't live with. One of them had bad service. One of them had bad service, but also common part failure, which they didn't fix very quickly. And one was very expensive. So I eliminated 2 based on the negative reviews and the price. And the one that was left, I picked because the negative reviews of bad service didn't bother me that much. As long as the machine runs, who needs service on an exercise machine? So consumers expect negative reviews, and they don't believe perfection. The reality is that research consistently shows that if you've got too high of a rating, you're going to turn customers off as much as anything. But the real reason is that these days, with Google functioning the way it does in local, most clients are taking action right on Google. In all of the clients that I'm looking at these days, somewhere in the order of 70 to 80% make the decision right on Google before they ever get to your website. Those that come through to your website have seen your reviews that Google provides from around the web at Google. So telling a different story on your website, again, seems like an obvious way to lose customer trust, not gain it. So it's really difficult to obfuscate your real average by showing just positive reviews on your website and by not giving consumers the opportunity to see what it was about you that other people didn't like so they can make a decision. It also functions to properly qualify customers and get you the right ones so that customers you do get are happier. So how do you make lemonade in all of this? Just as a note, lemonade is one of those things like real pudding. We've been told a myth our whole life. It's difficult to make. You take a lemon, you cut it in half, you squeeze half a lemon into a glass, you put 2 tablespoons of sugar and some nice fresh water in, you got lemonade. It's really easy. So like that, this isn't hard. I think there are 2 steps you have to follow. One is create a meaningful terms of service and include in it those other attributes about how you calculate averages and so on. And you have to moderate the reviews. You can't, or you just have to accept them the way they are. But the FTC is quite clear that there are a number of reasons that you don't need to show a review. You know, if they're harassing, if they're abusive, obscene, vulgar, sexually explicit, racist, misogynist, all of these reasons, you don't have to show a review. If they're inappropriate on any level, including things like mentioning competitors, promoting themselves, they're unrelated to your product or service, or they didn't do business with you. All those are good reasons for excluding them, but you really should have a standard terms of service published on your website so people know what the rules are. So when you do take a review down, nobody's going to say, oh, that review shouldn't come down. And you have to uniformly apply this across all your reviews. But with this, you can get rid of the really skanky ones, and the ones that are left should be just a critique of your business, not ad hominem attacks on your staff or other types of attacks that are unwarranted. Examples, and I know that Steve's going to give you some resources to gather up later on. These are ones, Barbara Oliver, Allstate, Pods, I helped develop or contributed to at some level. You can see these are examples of them. And also, if you look in the Google user contributed content areas, you can find a number of reasons. You can use any or all of these as they are appropriate to your business. Some are more appropriate than others in any given business context. For example, in Barbara Oliver, her standard is they have to have done business with her. She doesn't feel that they can properly assess her if they haven't. And so that's the standard. That's a reasonable one. So in terms of moderation strategies, I mean, you really have 3 choices. I only show the 2. Choice 1 is just to let the reviews go through and not worry about it. The other is to let them all go through and then individually moderate ones. As you get an email, maybe it violates terms of service. You get an email alert, you can then remove it, or don't show any automatically and then go through and manually approve them. So those are 2 moderation strategies. You know, I think in this context, agencies have opportunities to value add GatherUp further. One is by customizing a TOS to a given business, making sure that the guidelines and rules are clear, that they comply with the FTC, that they meet the needs of that business so that they do have a lot of reasons that if they want to, they can take a review down, help get that published on their website, make sure it's linked to from the review page, et cetera. And then the other is to actually provide moderation services to clients, including first line of service and support response. I believe this is a value add that every agency could easily do, could charge a lot for, that most businesses don't have time to do. And I think you could do a great job of it. So I think there is good lemonade in this opportunity. So to summarize, to succeed in this, I think it's pretty straightforward. Create terms of service, get it published, ask everybody for reviews, publish them all, at least the ones that you didn't need to moderate them fairly. And most important of all is respect your client in this context. You know, the real secret to doing well with reviews, it's pretty easy. If you have low ratings, they're easy to get better, suck less, build a better business, use complaints as a fundamental tool to help you improve. So if you enjoyed this presentation or you want the links, they're going to be available at nearmedia.co/FTC, where you can download this presentation, get all the links. While you're there, if you're interested, we do a 3 times a week newsletter on interesting topics in the local. So with that, over to you, Steve, unless there's questions.
Yeah, Thanks. Good stuff as always, Mike. I'm gonna just hang tight for a minute, see if anybody's got any questions specifically about what you covered before I get into gather up specific stuff. It doesn't look like I'm seeing any questions come through. So I will just jump ahead. So as you know, Mike alluded to, there's a lot of things changing, but you know, GatherUp had a little bit of practice with this when we updated in 2018 with the Google changes. So not a lot to update here. The big thing to know for GatherUp customers is that everything you need to be in compliance exists today. So the settings can be set up so that you're in compliance. There's nothing product related that has to be done. You know, you need to maybe change some defaults on your review widget. Look at how you're displaying reviews, just make sure you're not gating, which we shouldn't be, but there are some initial changes that have been made or that we'll be iterating on as well, just to make sure that as a platform that we're following the best practices to protect our customers, our agency partners, and things like that. So new customers moving forward will find some new default settings, but existing customers will not see those defaults set up immediately. So the first one on the collection, so kind of following Mike's cadence here on the collection of reviews, the best practice obviously was don't prevent or discourage people from submitting negative reviews. So within our request modes, we have our show review links toggle. So on the positive and negative landing page, there's a toggle that you can turn the review links on or off. We had the Google disclaimer. Now we have added the FTC wording as well. And so what you'll see there is at the bottom of your landing page, to show the online review links will say this must be on to be in compliance with FTC guidance and Google's terms of service. Now on the next screen here, what we see is if it's on in one, it should be on in the other. And these are the positive versus negative landing pages. So again, giving that customer the same opportunity, whether they were happy or not, to leave reviews on these third-party sites. This again was always the case with Google. We updated this with the FTC's guidance as well. One thing to note here, in the future, the plan is to lock these on. So if you have it on in positive, it'll be on in negative. And if you have it off in one, it will be off in the other. That way you will be guaranteed to be in that compliance of providing a same opportunity, whether they were happy or not. Now on the publication side, so this is the review widget, conversion pop-up. The guidance, of course, says to publish all reviews, don't exclude negative ones. So what we've done here is set some defaults to the lowest threshold. So that would be star rating of 0 and up, showing all Facebook recommendations. And then the average calculation that would appear in that widget will be from all the reviews, not just certain ones. So if you're unfamiliar with this, this is in your review widget settings. So you go to publish in the nav bar on the left, select review widget, go through your layout, and then the step 2 is where this exists. So you'll see on where the arrows are, those are the updates for new customers moving forward. So this default used to say 3.5 star on the top there, on the top 2. And now we've made that 0. So by default, the review widget will display all reviews, all Facebook recommendations. And then again, on the left side, the left arrow there is the rating average calculation is now per all reviews. The moderation piece is a little bit unique. You know, we haven't traditionally been the gatekeeper, I guess you'd say, on moderation. You know, it was kind of up to the business to have a process in place. But as Mike pointed out, review management platforms like ours and others now have a little bit more stake in this. And so what we've done is created a little helpful user guide to create a terms of service. And that's going to outline you know, your policy on why a review could be removed, because we still want you to have that control. As Mike said, there's different reasons that you wouldn't have a review show up in your review widget. So we wanted to make sure that you understand, in our businesses, that both agencies and businesses directly understand what they can have in that terms of service. So as a few examples, Mike had these reviews, these links as well. So Google Maps, off topic, that's one that comes up a lot. People will say, I had someone, I know they're not a customer and they left a review or things like that, or there's some spam or something related to somebody selling Bitcoin, right? So those things are obviously reviews or content that you'd want to remove out of that. Go to the next slide. There we go. So in this example on the left is pods, and Mike had this one linked as well. So below the widget, they have a link there. When you go to that link, it outlines their policy. Again, different things, and they use different wording than others, but there's certainly a full list that we can provide, like I mentioned. And then the last example is Allstate's, pretty robust, a little bit more traditional in nature, but depending on your business, you might customize this and have different headlines or bolded sections here like they do. The one thing I'll point out though is do not mistake any terms of service guidance we provide as legal guidance, right? So you're still going to want to talk to your legal counsel, have them approve it, look through it, make sure that you're covered on these things, because we are certainly not a law firm, but based on what we see from our other clients, from what Google says, we have put together a user guide article on how to create a terms of service for online reviews that should be helpful for most businesses and agencies as well.
I have one comment, Steve. I mean, I think that that Bitcoin review, that's a public service.
Very well might be.
Hey, gentlemen, we got a question from Trisha.
Okay.
So Trisha has some clients that are cherry picking, as she puts, cherry picking their best reviews and then putting it on their website using static images on their product and service pages. So her question is, would you recommend businesses not have text or images like this?
I think generally, I mean, the broad guidance in this situation is that if you use testimonials like this, they have to reflect the general experience of a typical consumer. So it is in violation of the meaning of the guidance. That being said, businesses have been doing this for thousands of years, and the likelihood of somebody complaining about it is low. If they're deceiving customers and are in other ways and are likely to raise flags, I'd worry about it. But if they're just, a mom and pop on the corner, it's like just the kind of dumb stuff they do, and it's probably okay. They're not going to get busted. I think that there's probably better ways to do it. I think that, like I said before, consumers want to understand the reality of doing business. And I think negative reviews have a very positive role to play in that. But if a business can't see that, that's their, it's sometimes takes a while for them to see that. With Barbara Oliver, it literally took me 5 years to move from gating and filtering and suppression to letting everything through. And as she learned and became comfortable with reviews, as she improved her business and responded to reviews and made the changes that people were looking for, once she got to that point, then she just let them all through. So I see it as a maturation process. I don't see it as a final thing, but letting them through, just explaining to them that someday they may want to think about it differently is probably the way to go, unless they're under some additional risk.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And Tricia says, thanks for that. We have a question here that I think would be a little more of a matter of opinion, but it's from a Kathleen Murphy, who says that she is a reporter for FTC Watch. Are there any further actions or refinements you/review management services would like the FTC to do in regards to reviews?
Yes, I think that that allowing, for example, incentives and allowing, it's okay to have people who have material connections to you to leave reviews. They should be out and out banned. I mean, there's no reason to try to make this subtle point that they're okay if you put a disclosure on them. They aren't, because people look at overall review ratings as much as they look at individual reviews. and those disclaimers are going to be lost. And so I think allowing those to come through is a mistake on the part of the FTC. It should be clean and simple. Now, like Chris said, opinions are kind of like noses or other parts of our anatomy. We all have them, they all smell. So you can take mine or not, but mine would be that they could be more aggressive about this and, get rid of these sort of if, ands, or buts in this. I also think that they should separate out testimonials and influencer endorsements from reviews. I believe reviews deserve their own treatment because of the increasing important role they're playing in our society versus endorsements or testimonials.
I would even add that the platforms themselves are governed differently and treated differently, and that causes confusion from a customer standpoint. Like a customer might look at a Yelp review and Google review and think, okay, that rating for that business is X or whatever. And a lot of times they're not. Like how Yelp collects reviews and moderates reviews is different than what Google does. And I know Mike, when you were still with GatherUp, we did some research on like the average rating for a business in Yelp is like 4 or 5 points lower than it is in Google. And it creates this kind of confusion on how can their rating be 3.7 on this platform, but 4.2 over here. The reviews seem different. So I think just like from a platform standpoint, there needs to be a little bit more uniformity or consistency in how those reviews are collected and moderated as well.
Thank you for the question.
Great insight. We have another question here. So if a business is putting all of their reviews on an all reviews page, so showing all reviews listed on that one page, but on specific product or service pages, they have reviews tagged with a keyword showing that particular product or service, but only showing positive reviews on those pages. Would that be against the FTC guidelines? And it's all reviews showing on one page, but on their product and services, they're only showing the ones that are positive.
Right. I think in this, you really want to try to avoid threading legalistic needles. My suggestion is, when I think about it, like if it smells, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This seems like a duck in that case. I think it's probably not the best practice. I think you want to show all reviews. Again, moderate as per terms of service, but show all reviews would be the best practice. And again, the risks here for some small little business is small, but I think that you want to lean into these changing societal values so that wave of sand doesn't flow over your house. I think customers deserve it. And I think there's benefits to it.
Yeah, I think the product or service page, a lot of times the reason to display reviews there, right, is a SEO play. And I think a lot of, there's other reasons to do it, but that's a big part of it, is to show up for those searches around those products or services. And even Google calls out that there's a mix of positive and negative reviews are more trustworthy. And so Google's even looking at that as indicators for ranking and showing up and organic search. So I agree that all of them should be included there. But I think, just the fact that Google is now basically out and out saying, we want a mix of positive and negative, and it's going to help you. If Google's saying that, it's probably because it's they're pointing some indicators there for search ranking. Yeah, definitely show them all. I mean, it would be inconsistent from a consumer standpoint to see it differently, I think, and that's the other downside.
I'd also like to add from my standpoint as well that rather than spending your time and energy on how to suppress negative reviews, a business as well as an agency should be spending their time and energy in crafting great responses to those negative reviews. Because as a consumer myself, I read the negative. I want to see when it goes bad, how do you handle that? And even as a consumer myself, I went with somebody who wasn't the highest rated paving company in my city, but I hired them because I loved the way they responded to any negative reviews. So I'd really encourage businesses and agencies to really take a step back and say, rather than stop negative reviews, let's talk about how we can handle those and how we can put our best foot forward when that happens.
Which is another service that I think agencies can provide. I know that particularly in the early days with Barbara Oliver, when she was very nervous about reviews, I would spend hours rewriting her responses so that they were non-defensive and helpful to other users, which is really the goal. And I spend time, it's billable service. I mean, I think that you can do it more dispassionately than a small business owner can do. They have, they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into their business. Criticism is often hard for them to hear, whether it's legitimate or not, but helping them respond in a way, like Chris said, is, I think, a really valuable service you can provide.
And also, as we wait for any final questions, I'm just going to post a link into the chat from something we did back in April of 2020, but we have our GatherUp review reply template blog article. But more importantly, in that article, it's discussing how to reply to these reviews, how to craft that great response. And just a reminder to any GatherUp users, we do have in our inbox feature, we do have a review reply template section. So you can make sure you're using some templates that take into account these ways to reply and the best way to take those head on. Well, gentlemen, I have no remaining questions. So final thoughts and send-offs.
Well, just for me, the send-off is, this is my I just finished my last official month as a consultant to GatherUp. I want to thank everybody in the crowd that has helped GatherUp get as far as it's gotten. I appreciate all of your support throughout the years, and it's meant a lot to me. And hopefully I might make a guest appearance in the future, but any formal obligations are now done. So anyways, thank you again for having me, Steve, and thank you all for helping GatherUp be a great product.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be mentioned, but your expertise is always appreciated, and I will totally take you up on guest appearances in the future as things come about. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I will post this on the website under gatherup.com/webinars. I will also send out a follow-up email with the recording and as requested, some of those links as well that were in there. But thanks again. Watch for our next webinar. It should be about 3 weeks away, and enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.